Okay, well, I know probably going to be some folks joining us slowly, but as they trickle in, I will welcome everyone. My name is Cassandra Polizu. My pronouns are she, her. I am a Greek East Indian settler on traditional and unceded lands of the Amamo and Ninewag, Anishinaabe, the original peoples of these lands. And as we gather here on a virtual national platform, we do like to acknowledge the ancestral and the unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that call this land home. Here on Anishinaabe territory, this land currently is covered in a few feet of snow, and the Kitchissippi River is frozen, and we've had about 2 weeks of extreme cold warnings, and I was sort of thinking about that, how it's been about minus 35 or minus 38, but we're also at the same time awaiting and watching the arrival of this convoy that's full of protesters calling for an end to vaccine mandates in Canada that are rolling down the road this way, or they're here already. And I was thinking about sort of the division that runs rampant in discourse and in issues and on the news and in kind of the human world, I guess, in general. And even just looking at the news this morning and the anxiety that caused for me. And I was thinking and reflecting on my land acknowledgement today and thinking about the land and the ecology and the interconnections and relationships there that I've interacted with and I've heard elders speak of. And I know I will spend, and I hope you can all spend some time today and hopefully on the weekend reflecting and communing with winter as a season and with the earth. And I've also been inspired by Anishinaabe scholar Melanie Howard. Some of you might know her. She's from the Big Tigon, Anishinaabe and Kitigan Zibi First Nations. And she speaks and writes about the importance of centering systems change on relationships, on connecting lessons from Anishinaabe culture and Western worldviews. And I know that reading her work often does help me to take a step back and inward. Just think that there's a lot of wisdom there. So I'm going to share a link to one of her podcasts in the chat if folks wanted to check it out. Great. So we also like to remind folks that we meet today with some guiding elements to ensure a meaningful session together. We do strive for an inclusive learning and sharing environment, and we ask everyone to be mindful of the impact of their words and keep the conversation respectful. And we also recognize that everyone's coming to our space from different points, from different experiences and unique identities, and also learning journeys, and we all have differing perspectives. So we hope we can all listen with openness and bring curiosity. We expect everyone to maintain an open mind and be respectful of your comments and behavior, and please be mindful of how your words might impact others. I don't want to spend too much more time on these kind of guiding elements, and I know a lot of us do know each other. And the other thing is that we're actually going to be recording this session, so sharing it with a broader audience even more. So I'll jump into the agenda next, Yasmin, if you don't mind. Thank you. So we're super excited to have Melanie Howard and Randy Herman here. We know many of you know them and their experiences and insights on the work that they've been doing in their institutions to create space for Indigenous students in engineering are significant. And we thought it's been a while since we've heard from them on their programs, and there's been some really great work going on of late as well. And we thought it'd be great to focus this meeting on their presentations and the work that they're doing. So we're recording this meeting, as I said, and we'll be posting it on our YouTube channel for future viewing. So we ask that everyone turn off their cameras, turn off their microphones while the presentations are going on. So first we'll have Melanie talk about Queen's University's Indigenous Futures in Engineering program. And then we'll have a short Q&A for Melanie specifically. And then we'll pass the floor over to Randy, and he can talk about the University of Manitoba's NGAP, or Engineering Access Program. and then we'll have questions for Randy. So you're welcome to enter your questions in the chat, and I'll be monitoring the chat and bring up the questions during the Q&A, but you're also welcome to turn on your cameras and your microphones after the presentations and ask questions for Melanie and for Randy. So without further ado, I think we'll pass the floor over to Melanie to share her slides, and while she's getting set up, Melanie is the Director of Indigenous Futures and Engineering at Queen's University, Faculty of Engineering and Applied Sciences. She is also the inaugural recipient of the Principal's Teaching Award for Indigenous Education in 2020. She has had a tremendous impact, and I'm such a big fan and have really learned a lot from you, Melanie, over the last several years. It's really a joy to work with you and to see all the great work that you do with your students. So I'll pass it over to Melanie Howard.
Yo, Cassandra, segmo sa wagwego, dawis a kiyunjets, waganyatu danu ganasadaga ni dewageno, Queen's University Wajote. So my name is Melanie Howard, as Cassandra noted. I'm a Turtle Clan and Mohawk from the territory or community of Ganasadaga, which is north of Montreal. And I continue to live on the traditional territories of my peoples, part of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, in a shared territory with the Anishinaabe here in Kingston, Ontario. So I decided to set myself up in the office today. This is a nice Zoom background of our student space on campus. And you can see a little bit of a gray Kingston back there. It is actually quite sunny and cold here today, but that is where I'm starting. So I am the director of Aboriginal, what used to be Aboriginal Access to Engineering. And actually this week marks our official transition into Indigenous Futures in Engineering. So any of you who follow our program on social media have noticed, or Queen's University's engineering faculty have noticed quite a bit of us in the news this week, as we're rolling into our 10th year of operation, or our 10-year anniversary in our 11th year of operation now. And we have renamed the program Indigenous Futures in Engineering, or INENG for short. So this is the team I work with. We are largely a collection of education trained professionals. So we are not engineers. I like to say to people, I'm from an engineering family, but I'm the educator. So my siblings are both engineers. My dad was an engineer. He's retired, and but I am trained as a teacher, and I did work as a classroom teacher for 10 years. On staff, we have Gunnar Dahawi, Nicole General, who is from Tyendinaga, and she is tasked with our STEM outreach coordination. And then we have a couple of brand new people this year. The team is constantly in flux and growing. I have to say, for the first about 7 years, it was a team of one. We did add outreach, was the first position that we added beyond mine. And then more recently, we have brought on Carissa Miracle and Roberta Biggity, who are working more in the student services areas, and we'll speak more to their what their work is later. So the major priorities for our program are, of course, outreach, K-12, math and science enrichment, and student success, which is what we are here to talk about today. Predominantly, this has been undergraduate services, but as the program has grown, we're getting a little bit more intentional in our recruitment of graduate level students, and then looking at how we can support those students as well. The entire foundation of the program, I think, is important to note based on relationships. So relationships with the natural world as engineers, and what we consider journeying through that educational journey with the communities we work with, particularly in our outreach work, and then finally with individuals. And some of the people on the call, I have had the opportunity to come across in my journey through this position that I love my job. So, but in this position that allows me to meet such amazing people in the Indigenous STEM space across the country and even in the US. So by getting to know individuals, you get to know what they're all about and what their background is, and make some really interesting connections. I included this photo here because we do have Joe Connolly from NASA. He's a PhD aerospace engineer with family history and roots in Six Nations, one of the communities that we work in. And Joe had always been really excited about the work that our team was doing in Six Nations. And this was actually one of the very last outreach things we did ahead of the pandemic shutting us down. So we did some rocketry out in Six Nations. So those relationships are really key to finding the connections, I think, between students, the youth we work with, the professionals we work with, and bringing it all together. A quick word about outreach. We do focus predominantly on the K-8 grades, and actually more specifically on grades 3 to grade 8. And we are embedded in partner schools. Throughout the pandemic, we haven't been able to be in person, but that has flipped to online remote workshops. So we do continue to maintain those engagements virtually. We basically are trying to bring in an enhanced approach to STEM learning in classrooms and a culturally informed approach as well. And we work very closely with the teachers to keep things guided and on track in the way the school wants things to go. We also try to include our students whenever possible as role models for younger students. We are kind of in a geographic black hole for Indigenous communities. So the students cannot often get out to the communities because they're just a little bit too far away for day trips. But when they do, it's often to Tyendinaga, which is about 45 minutes down the road. And here we have a few students who are judging a Rube Goldberg competition a few years ago. But the students, of course, are what we want to talk about. I can go on forever about outreach, really a passion, obviously, as a former teacher. But student success is what we're here to chat about a little bit today. Cassandra, I have not started my timer, so I'm going to need somebody to cut me off at some point if I go too long. But so Indigenous student success and how we're defining and looking at that is looking at success in the academic programs at Queen's Engineering, and then preparing them for transition into their careers as engineers or into further study. Either, now some of our students have gone on to graduate studies, but also MBAs or medical school. And our approach is a holistic model. I hesitate to say it's based on the medicine wheel. It's not necessarily, but we are really looking at supporting the whole student. Academically, culturally, socially, and in the context of their professional development for when they move on from their time at Queen's. Academics is really the starting point of engagement with a lot of the students, as opposed to cultural. So we do offer the students something that they need and want, which is access to a designated study space. We do have our own space in the main engineering building at Queen's. We offer a tutoring service and exam prep for the students, and all of those services are paid for. The staff will find tutors for the students and match them. And then we also encourage the students, presenting them with scholarship opportunities and assisting them with filling in the applications for that. Now, when I was prepping these slides for this show, I thought, oh my gosh, 2018-19, like we haven't done anything since then in terms of the numbers, but this is actually the last, it's sad to say, the last normal year on campus where we were there all year in person. 54% of our students were using formalized academic services. So basically anything with a price tag, I consider formalized academic services and not just dropping in to grab some fruit from the table in the student room. But important to that was 100% of the first year students were engaged. And that's more and more often the case. I particularly think this is important because that's a really key transition point for the students from high school into first year. So 100% engagement on getting the students academic support, and that community building is really, really key, I think. Now, culturally, of course, our staff are all Indigenous, but cultural events are not the mainstay of our program. We do liaise quite significantly with Four Directions, our Indigenous Student Center, the Office of Indigenous Initiatives on campus, and then in Kingston, the Métis Nation of Ontario office, to promote those opportunities for cultural development in the students. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel, that those services provide amazing opportunities for our students. But sometimes those opportunities really clash with an engineering student's schedule. Engineering students, as you all know, have very, very tight schedules. And so they often, what we were finding, they can't often participate in those opportunities offered by the other services. So as the students identify things that they want to do and don't have a chance to do, particularly because of their schedules, we'll give them the opportunity to do that. And in the pictures, you see kind of one of the mad crazy weekends of ribbon shirt and ribbon skirt making ahead of a conference that we attended in Montreal with ACES a few years back. And so this is the kind of thing that we use to build community. The students were all headed to this STEM-based conference and wanted to sort of represent Queens as they went there and learn some traditional skills. We host an annual graduation honor feast, and I purposely have not flipped that online. I think that's a very important in-person ceremonial gathering for us. And so I'm really crossing my fingers for 2022. On the social side of things, the first point of contact is usually on Welcome Day, which is a one-day move-in ahead of regular move-in that 4 Directions runs. So we meet the students and their families on Welcome Day and start building that relationship. We get together during the week or during the year. We prior to the pandemic, bi-weekly gatherings that the students have affectionately had called AA Eats, and I've just dropped the AA now and just call it Eats. So getting together in this like casual food-based setting is really, really key to developing our community. We have continued to do that throughout the pandemic. It's a little less frequently, and it is online with Uber Eats gift cards, so not as fun, but we did just have one last night and there were about 10 students, so pretty impressive at this point of the Zoom fatigue for everyone. We communicate with the students largely through Instagram these days. This way we were able to put up posters of our events and run a link tree with links. But the students really don't use Facebook and rarely check their emails, I'm finding. So we just we meet them where they are, and Instagram is where they are. So that's largely how we communicate with them. And again, getting to know those students to me is foundational, that I know where they're coming from, what they're hoping for, what they're really interested in, what their dreams are, and keeping that in mind, filing that information so that when opportunities do cross my desk, that I can make sure I choose the appropriate student to match up with that. And whenever possible, we do try to involve, like I said, our students with community outreach leadership opportunities. So professional development wise, we allow the students, or we have a budget to allow students to attend conferences. In particular, we're very keen on getting them to the ACES conferences, which many of you have heard of. I'm not going to go into ACES too much. We provide a resume review and initial stages. Career services, in my mind, are the experts in this, but certainly when students are just starting out in first and second year, we can kind of dust off their resumes and get them ready to go over to career services, and it's a little more personalized. We have I have done industry liaison. That has largely been me up until the addition of Roberta just this month. And this is to connect students with summer and full-time work. And then mentorships, although the students have repeatedly requested mentorships in sort of polls and surveys that we do, the uptake is always low on those. So I call mentorships are now ad hoc. If you're really serious about it, I will find you someone to be your mentor, but we don't have a formalized program. Just because we'd get professionals lined up to be mentors and then the students wouldn't engage. So that's maybe a lesson learned there. ACES is really a mainstay for us. It's been a source of great enjoyment, but also learning for our students over the years, traveling to various ACES conferences in the US and also now thankfully here in Canada. So who exactly are these students I'm talking about? This is kind of a profile of Indigenous engineering students at Queen's. So this is a look at how our enrollment on campus has increased. From 4 students when the program kicked off. I arrived in late 2012, so the school year had already started. And then it has grown slowly, but it has grown. And this is without targeted recruitment. So we really haven't done anything beyond what the central admissions team is doing with 4 Directions. There hasn't been a focus on recruitment. In that time, we have graduated 41 undergrads from engineering. So this is kind of a cumulative numbers along the way here. And in recent years, we've had more graduate students, and that is really building. Right now we have 6 graduate students. All of them have been at the master's level to this point. New for us last year, midway through last year, we launched STEMina. So STEMina is STEM Indigenous Academics, and it's a transitional program based on the AAE or the INEng model that we've used in engineering, but it is now open to all STEM-based undergrad degree programs at Queen's. So Indigenous students from across 3 faculties are participating in STEMina. And what has been great, amazing for me, finally, to have a dedicated program coordinator really looking at events and planning and coordinating the tutors and all of that thing, because in adding all of those science students from the other faculties, we're now up over 120 students who we're working with. And so Carissa on our team is tasked with that. Her background, again, is in education, and she also has additional qualifications. She's a high school teacher, and she has additional qualifications in guidance, which I find really suits her role. So STEMina does a week-long now transitional program for families and students. So we've gone beyond the 1 day, which sometimes the students had indicated, and the parents especially had indicated, it was really too fast for a transition. So we now bring the families in for the weekend and have a week long with the students ahead of the rest of campus moving in. We're organizing small group tutorials and individual tutoring for the first year students, and that individual guidance and tutoring continues throughout the upper years. And Carissa is tasked with a weekly series of workshops and events that we tailor to interests and subjects of interest to Indigenous students in STEM. Being Indigenous women in STEM, we have an entire series of what we call STEM Quay workshops and other events that are revolved around supporting the development of them as academics within STEM fields. And finally, our special events have really kind of been curtailed this year, but we did manage to get on one pre-exam retreat ahead at the very tail end when Omicron had just been mentioned on the news in November. That was actually a topic of conversation on the drive up to the retreat. And we're hoping for a conference weekend. Unfortunately, ACES in Canada has been postponed to next year, but we're hoping to maybe make it down to Cornell University for the Region 6 ACES conference. Where we're headed in 2022, we're flipping back to the pathway. It's really taking a concentrated look on developing pathways from college engineering tech programs into Queen's engineering. This is something that was, there is some funding in place to support those students already, and that has been there since 2015, but there hasn't been as much of a focused effort on getting students from the college into Queen's. That has largely been a function of the relationship with the college, to be honest. We've had 3 students come through this pathway, but an ONCAT project that Queen's has been working on, and ONCAT is the Ontario Council for, oh my goodness, Articulation and Transfer. Forgive me if that's wrong, anyone watching this. However, the ONCAT project is really looking at bringing a number of college tech programs into engineering at Queen's, and was ready to go, was just at the starting gate almost, just ahead of the pandemic, of course. So that went on the shelf for a couple of years, but that has restarted, and there is an Indigenous focus to that I've been kind of involved in all along. And so the intent for the college to engineering pathway, which is not a simple one in Ontario, other provinces, I think, do it much better than we do from what I can tell, but providing our student engagement during their college years with our programming for the students that we have on campus. This is why the St. Lawrence College one was obviously a little more favorable. St. Lawrence College is literally down the road. Those students could come to social events. They could come to the STEMina events if they wanted to. But we will support all students interested in a pathway towards Queen's engineering with academic support at a distance. And we're working with the Indigenous support units at the college, the partner colleges. And finally, the addition of Roberta to our team this month has been already amazing. She came at just the right time for someone who is tasked with careers and recruitment. So Careers is a space that I feel like I haven't done justice to. And really having Roberta in place, we're going to be taking an opportunity to really learn from our corporate relations team and our career services team more broadly at Queen's to identify and share opportunities with our students, and also to somewhat vet the opportunities that go to our students. There's quite an interest in hiring Indigenous engineers these days, as I'm sure many of you on the call are aware, but the way companies are doing this sometimes it makes me question the motive. So really, Roberta will be working with our corporate relations team that has developed some really great guidance documents for companies considering EDI recruitment and applying that to our relationships and really giving it time to get to know the companies who are trying to recruit our students. Once this whole careers time of year has died down, which right now it's a frenzy, Roberta jumped in and had to host a networking event in her first month at work, or her first week at work. She'll be looking at some direct recruitment for graduate programs into engineering, and then enhancing our undergrad recruitment somewhat with some digital marketing. Now, to quickly wrap up, who are our students? I see Cassandra's popped on, so I'm probably hitting my time. The students, we've had 92 unique students over the years, and these are now students that we considered verifiable Indigenous identity. Students in Ontario do self-identify when they come into engineering programs and any undergrad programs through OUAC, but so we actually have worked with more students, but now that we are actually just considering the verifiable students, we have 92. Majority are First Nation status students, with a small percentage of non-status students, and that would be students who are 1 or 2 generations away from having status themselves. The Métis students you see here are about 1/3 of the students, and they are all members of Métis organizations that are federally recognized. And the 1%, as you can imagine, represents 1 student who is of Inuit ancestry and enrolled as Inuit. Gender identity breakdown is a little bit along the same lines as engineering in general, with majority male, but we do actually have a significant number of female non-binary students at 35% between the two. So I'm happy about that. And about 15% of our students are first generation. Where they're coming from, our First Nation students are largely from Southern Ontario, with a number of them more recent years coming directly from First Nations. Our non-status students kind of break out the same way with Métis. And then our Inuit student, you would have expected that to be out of province, but actually came from the GTA. So you never make assumptions. And one last word, how does this get paid for? I get that question a lot. So student services is largely funded through the Ministry of Colleges and Universities through something called the Indigenous Student Success Fund. It's something all colleges, universities, and Indigenous institutes have access to. So it's a portion of the grant that Queen's is assigned. And the Stamina program, which is in its pilot year this year, was under the Indigenous Targeted Initiatives Fund. It's a grant stream by the MCU. So I applied for a grant for Stamina. And just about halfway into the year, we had an incredible philanthropic announcement ahead of the holidays that Norman and Gay Loveland, who've long been supporters of our program, really saw, like they saw something and saw the need and saw what has happened with student services, and decided to put their support behind continuing Stamina. So $1 million donation is now endowed to keep the services of Stamina going for Indigenous engineering students. And just throwing it on quickly, NSERC largely funds our outreach, as does the ACTUA, various opportunities through the ACTUA network. And that is it.
I give your voice a break.
Yes, my voice is like kicking out on me. Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. Like so much has happened over the last few years, and since you've been there, and It's quite amazing to see it grow, and congratulations on the growth of the program. I'm just curious if folks have any questions for Melanie. Lots of people clapping. Great job.
I like the little Zoom room claps.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I guess I was going to ask you about, I guess, what do you think are some of the things that have contributed to your success? I know you talked about relationships as being a big part of it. And I know in previous times you've talked about the community connections and having yourself there, like having a resource with knowledge of the needs of the communities. Yeah, like, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about what's contributed to your success.
Honestly, it almost entirely boils down to relationships, and I've come to recognize this through the pandemic. We haven't been able to build as solid of a relationship with the first and second year students now. So I don't know them as well. And I don't like that feeling of not knowing them as well. We certainly do know about half of them who came to transition week and who partake in our activities and put themselves out there. But I do wonder about the ones that I don't quite know yet. We were on campus, luckily, in the fall. So engineering at Queen's did go back in person. So I was able to schedule meetings with a number of them. And that's, I do invite them to what I phrase the email such that they don't think it's an optional meeting. They seem to think it's a mandatory meeting, which is fine by me because I'd really like to get them in before things get dicey for them. So again, and this isn't assuming everyone's going to have issues. I think some of the biggest cheerleaders and supporters for the tutoring program and the services we offer are actually some of our most successful students. And they will admit to the other students, listen, I didn't really need the tutoring, but it really helped me with my time management. It helped me to meet other people, get connected with Melanie and now the other staff so that I knew what opportunities were out there for me. So I really appreciate those upper year students saying, hey, I didn't think I needed it either, but there's so many other things that come out of those little tutorial groups and spending time in the room. So make sure you do it. I think our biggest champions are when the older student, the third and fourth year students come in and talk to the first year students like that during transition week, that they're like, listen, I was just where you were 3 years ago. Listen to this lady, get to know her. And so I really appreciate that from the students. But yeah, relationships is basically, I think, bottom line, it's key.
Yeah, and empowering the students to share in that peer-to-peer learning really spreads the word. I know Kier and Karine have your hands up. Not sure who was first.
You want to go first, Kier? It's okay. Okay. So first of all, thank you, Melanie, for the great presentation. It's always great to hear all the awesome work being done at Queen's. I was actually at the networking event, great event. Unfortunately, not a lot of attendance, but I just wanted to mention to you, but also to the other people on the call, if you're ever doing this event, great inspiration coming from Queen's. There was a booklet that's handed out to the employers prior to the event. And I thought that was really, really good because I went to another event at another institution last fall and we didn't have any material for the employers to actually come to the safe space with the right mindset. And I found that the documents that were developed by Queen's were really good at that. So it provided, some employees don't need handholding, but some do. And I think if everyone attending those events needs to come with the right mindset, that certainly is an excellent tool to kind of let people know how they should come to these events and prepare accordingly. The other thing I wanted to ask, and I don't think I missed it, but I was wondering if there was any support for your students in terms of preparing for interviews. I know that at the NRC, we're trying to influence researchers and paying attention to the fact that students might not present themselves as normal mainstream students would, but I was wondering if students are kind of supported, because I've recently heard of a student that is awesome, but he was shy, had trouble kind of selling his stuff, and he winded up third on the list, unfortunately, but I'm sure that if he had like opportunities to develop his self-confidence, maybe that would have helped him. So is that something that you guys are offering or thinking of offering?
Yeah, it's definitely on. And thanks. I'm going to pass that back to the corporate relations team and career services who put that document together. I was just on my planning meeting with Carissa this morning. One of our Stamina events is going to be assertive speaking, and preparing for interviews and resumes is on the agenda for this next month. January, kind of, we're back online again, which is not the ideal student interaction platform for events. So we know it's probably going to be low attendance, but they certainly have the opportunity. And that is part of Carissa's planning. That's part of the Stamina program. So those professional skills development includes prepping for interviews, how to run your resume. And then we are actually doing an assertive speaking. We plan to do an assertive speaking night specifically for the STEMina students or STEMQA students, so the women in STEM, because sometimes they get spoken over in groups and stuff on campus. So that is we're aware of these issues, and we're trying to provide opportunities for the students for development in those areas.
Thanks, Melanie. Thanks, Karine. And Karine, I think I didn't get you to do an introduction. Do you mind just telling us your title, what organization you're with?
Oh, well, I thought everyone knew me. Karine Lacoste, I'm from the National Research Council. I'm working at the Vice President's Office of Engineering, and I'm really trying to help connect my organization with students across the country and help students find the best place that they can go, if it's in our organization or as a client, partner, collaborator, future entrepreneur. So Karine Lacoste from NRC. Not Natural Resource Counts, not Natural Resources, but National Research Council. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I know we have only a couple more minutes. I don't want to cut into too much of Randy's time. So I see Kier and then Russ. Kier, go ahead.
I've got hopefully maybe two quick questions. One of them is, how do you choose the tutors for the students?
Well, we have a great service within engineering that already vets them, but I take a look at transcripts if they don't come to us through EngLinks, and largely the graduate students who are hired, and often for the upper year courses, we have to hire graduate students. We go through the department managers who actually know the students quite well. Okay. And we'll connect with, someone in mechanical to say we need, this specific third year course, and who would be a good grad student, do you think? And they facilitate those introductions for us.
Yeah. Okay, cool. No, that's great, because that's always interesting parts is like, do you have somebody?
We do also give the students, we do sit the students down. Now we email them to say that if it's not working out between you and a tutor, let us know. No problems. Like sometimes it's just personalities often. It doesn't happen often, but it did in the fall. There was one tutor who a couple of students kind of flagged as like, oh, this isn't working out for me. So we switched to new tutors, and it's just, part of the relationship management, and we're not going to force something that's not benefiting the student. So.
Cool. And are you able to share the employer handbook that you?
I can.
Okay.
I don't know if it'll be exactly what Karine received as an employer who was at a networking, but there is something available online. I will track it down, and I'll send it to Cassandra to share it with people.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. And yeah, if anyone who doesn't know me, I'm Kier Portress. I'm involved with lots of different things. I do my own consulting under Portress Consulting Group. I'm also the Director of Indigenous Relations for QM Environmental, a national environmental services contractor in Canada. And I also teach a course at UVic, fourth year course, which I'm doing right now. Okay, thanks so much. It was a really great presentation, and I look forward to getting that.
For sure.
Russ, you got the last question.
Russ Kinghorn from the traditional lands of the Ktunaxa people in Cranbrook, BC, southeast corner. Kisupukit. I am non-Indigenous. My question, though, is around your outreach. We're talking about dealing with students grades 3 to 8. Have you seen patered, if you will, i.e., have you seen some students from your outreach that have managed to make it to the university? And the reason this is so important is that it's a long-term planning thing that is off the radar of most every government because it doesn't pay off right away.
Mhm. So I can answer that. Yes, we have seen three students come that we met when they were 11 or 12 years old. We actually featured them in one of the videos this week, although they didn't use the grade 7 pictures of him in the video. So when they edited it, you don't see grade 7 Cohen, but Cohen speaks to how engineering outreach like changed his life when he was in grade 7 and made him realize this is what he wants to do.
Is that video available online?
Yes, I'll link it. It's
Okay.
one of the videos I said we did kind of a media takeover of the faculty this week, and it's one of the videos that came out a couple of days ago. The intent behind our outreach has not been recruitment. So it has been very specifically educational opportunities for Indigenous youth. But I will say that in my next strategic plan over the next 5 years, you're going to see something much more targeted in terms of following students and giving them an opportunity all the way through high school and tracking how that's going. So that's where we're evolving, but it's always been very important to me as an educator to make opportunities available to as many kids as we can. So the focus has not been on recruitment. But we are kind of evolved to the place where I'd like us to start doing something a little bit more for those kids that we see are really excited in grade 7, especially by grade 7 and 8. And then we kind of drop off because in Ontario, we are working with First Nations schools that are on reserve, but in Ontario, most First Nations don't run their own high schools. So the kids then go to high school, like public high schools, and we kind of lose them. So we're trying to strategically think about how we can do that. But I'll send Cohen's video along too, so you can see.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I can anything
I'm
you
gonna
send me.
cut me off.
I know.
Randy has to go.
Randy has to go, and you have to go too.
Yeah.
Melanie, thank you so much. We'll send links out. Thank you so much.
It was nice to be here again. Thanks. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to pass the floor over to Randy Herman, the director at the University of Manitoba's Engineering Access Program, or NGAP, as a lot of folks know it. Randy, you have the floor. We can go over time, and if folks need to leave at the hour, we completely understand. Please enter your questions in the chat for Randy. And if we can just pin Randy on the view.
Can you see my slides? Yeah.
Yes, we can.
I apologize. I might go a little bit over time. So if people have to leave, they have to leave, I guess. That's just the way of it. I will try to go fast though. So I'm coming to
Randy, no worries though. Sorry to interrupt, but
yes.
we're recording this. So
yeah.
Take your time and folks can watch it, but we want to get all the information that you have, and thank you so much.
Okay. You don't want me to take my time. I don't think there's that much recording space available. I'm coming to you from Manitoba. I work in Winnipeg, Manitoba, but I live just outside of Winnipeg. But these are the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, the Cree, the Oji-Cree, the Dakota, and the Dene people, as well as the homeland of the Métis Nation. I'm here to talk to you about the Engineering Access Program, which is me. This is me. First of all, I'm the director of the program. I'm an engineer, been an engineer. I belong to the Manitoba Métis Nation. So what is NGAP? Well, we're housed at the University of Manitoba in the Faculty of Engineering. And that's a picture of our building and a picture of our logo, which was designed by one of our students many years ago. There's a picture, a longer picture of the University of Manitoba campus. We actually started in 1985. So we've been around for many, many years. I haven't been there since the start. I was still a student when it started, but certainly I've been there since 1998. So we have a lot of history with what we do here. In a very short form, I like to think of our program sort of as a four-legged stool of supports. We offer academic supports, financial supports, personal supports, as well as social supports. So how do we do this? Well, I think if you were looking at the best model of outreach, you would be looking at Melanie's program. We try to do a lot of outreach, but we are tied up with other things, our day-to-day jobs. So we don't do as much outreach as Melanie does, but I can't stress enough the importance of outreach. And outreach has got to be looked at as more than just recruitment. You cannot go into Indigenous communities, into the grade 12 or the grade 11 classrooms and recruit students, because you've already probably lost half the kids. So you got to start earlier than that. You got to start with that, getting that belief and that knowledge of engineering and science even to younger and younger students, as you notice with Melanie talking about grades 3 to grade 8 students. So here's some of the resources that we have or have developed. One of these comes from Queen's University, from what engineers do. I have a math instructor on staff, and she's developed this Aboriginal Math Links book, aims at grades 5 to 7. We also did this, the Birch Bark Canoe Project, a video project and a workbook, and the Three Sisters Project, again, a video project and a workbook, both aimed at anywhere from kindergarten up to grade 12. We're working on our third project right now. That's going to be based on structures, based on the TP as well as trade networks. As an example of some of the work we do in any given year, of course, with COVID, we haven't done this much outreach, but these are some of the places that we oftentimes go to. And you can kind of see the stretch. We go right up into Iqaluit, right up into Rankin Inlet, and then pretty much across Manitoba. We get out into the communities, into the First Nation communities and Métis communities. We shamelessly use NGAP alumni as role models in our program. Role models in engineering, Indigenous role models in engineering are sometimes hard to come by, so we use our own students and our own graduates. And here's some of them. We partner on campus wherever we can. We have partnerships with WISE, as you noticed with Melanie was talking about Actua. This is our Actua program on campus. It's called WISE Kinetic Energy, and we share a staff member between us that does recruitment for both of our programs. So a lot of questions I'm asked talk about how does the actual program actually function. So I'm going to start sort of with the first step, and that's the interview not the interview process, starts with the process of applying to our program. So a student will apply to our program. Once they apply, we review their application. It's quite an extensive application they have to fill out. We ask almost every student that applies to our program, we ask them to come in for an interview. We spend about an hour interviewing them. The staff and myself, as well as an engineering professor, interviews the students, or typically that what was done prior to COVID, and we would bring them in person, and we would interview all of the students, and we would get a feeling for what kind of students they were going to be and what much they knew about engineering. Usually at the interview stage, we don't use the interview stage to accept or reject students usually. We use it as a stage to understand what the students' motivations are and what kind of, how well prepared they are to come into engineering. Not necessarily just academically prepared, but prepared in all areas. Have they thought about housing? Have they thought about childcare? Have they thought about how much studying they're going to have to do? All of these things that we will do. So after the interview process, we will send students out an invitation to join us for summer orientation. Like Melanie was talking about, we run a 2-week summer orientation. Our orientation runs the 2 weeks just before September long weekend, so at the end of August, and so that a student, after they're done our orientation, can transition right into first year engineering. So we do a bunch of different things in summer orientation, but primarily we do an assessment of their math skills. We teach them how to write university level papers. We work with them on their resume. We work with them on their cover letters. We work with them on their English skills. And we start doing work with them so that we develop them into a cohort, ice-breaking exercises, get them to know their peers, and that sort of thing. At the end of the summer orientation, there will be 3 routes a student could go possibly. One would be sort of going into our program. The other route might be they would go into our program but they'd be put on probation. And the last route might be that we, at that point after orientation, we might choose to exit the student. We only exit students if their behavior is completely untenable to succeeding in engineering. So to fail out of our orientation, they would literally have to not show up for any of the classes, not do any of the homework, and show absolutely no interest in pursuing, into going forward. So once a student has identified themselves, we've done the selection process, they finish the summer orientation. What we do then is we take first year engineering, and what we've done is we take first year and we've put it over 2 years. Okay, so a typical student in NGAP will take a lighter course load, right? Because they were spread the 12 courses of first year engineering over 2 years. And that also allows us to give them preparatory classes. We offer upgrading or transition classes, whatever you want to call that, in chemistry. We offer 2 in physics, sort of a grade 11 physics, electrical physics, if you will, and kinematics and dynamics physics. We also offer a computer programming course, as well as a combined 10, 11, 12 mathematics course, applied mathematics course, all to prepare our students. Now, any given student may take one or all of these courses or none of these courses, depending on what academic preparedness they had prior to coming into NGAP. I will say that at any given time, probably about 25 to 30% of our students have achieved direct entry into engineering. And between them and us, we have decided they do not need any upgrading classes, and they will go direct entry into engineering. And those students may or may not decide to take a lighter course, so they might take a heavy course load, and then we will assist them as we can. But the bulk of the students will take some form of preparatory classes. Many of them have not had the opportunity for a successful experience in high school sciences or mathematics. Many students still don't have these classes offered in their high schools in any given year. In addition to those 4 or 5 upgrading courses, we also teach first year calculus to our students. Our math instructor teaches first year calculus. That allows us to teach that calculus course to a small group of students, primarily just our students, and allows us to teach it in an expanded time frame. So in regular engineering at the University of Manitoba, a student will have access to the professor in class for about 3 hours a week. Our calculus class is every day, so it's a 5-hour a week plus a lab on top of it, a tutorial on top of it once a week. As well, our students who are in the upgrading program, who are taking the upgrading program, are also enrolled in university level engineering courses or university level courses, which can be part of their engineering degree. So they might take engineering design, they might take an English course, they might take a critical thinking course, depending on what we can fit into their schedule. From the time that they have arrived on campus, our students are engineering students, even if they are doing a full complement of upgrading courses. Again, this is talking about our calculus course. We do offer calculus to our students, Calc 1 to our students, because we know that this is a linchpin of engineering. Our students are with us while they complete their first year of engineering. They are called NGAP students. They have a special code until they complete first year engineering. And if you remember correctly, that takes them typically 2 years, but they are allowed to take 3 years to finish first year engineering. Once they have done that, they will matriculate into an engineering department. Computer engineering, electrical engineering, civil engineering, biosystems engineering, mechanical engineering, they'll go into those departments. Once they join a department, they are subject to all the same rules as any other student in that department. When they are in NGAP, before they join a department, then the staff and I are the ones who determine their fate. So we decide if they get put on probation, we decide if they get exited, we decide all of those things until they join a department. When they join a department, it will be up to the department head and the department council. We do have tutoring services available to our students. And again, even though on paper, NGAP is a 2-year program, 2 or 3 year program, our students remain with NGAP until they graduate, even when they're departmental students. So if a student in 4th year civil engineering comes to me and says, oh, I really need a tutor, that student has a tutor. Our students are available to access 3 hours of tutoring a week without charge. They can access more, but after 3 hours, they have to come and approach one of the staff members, our academic advisor, and ask her if it's okay to get more hours. I'm going to sort of answer, I think it was Kier's question earlier, and that question was of who are the tutors. We do a call out for tutors, but we really encourage NGAP students who have had a high grade in that course the year before. We encourage them to apply to be tutors. So we really try to get that mentorship piece working where the NGAP students who are doing well will tutor students who are having difficulty. We have an academic advisor on staff. Because we have a small staff, we have 5 full-time equivalents, 4 full-time staff members. Everyone does double duty. So our academic advisor is also the one that teaches the upgrading mathematics course in the first term. And she's also the one that teaches the calculus course in the second term or the winter term. We have a full-time counselor on staff. The counselor's role is to obviously counsel the students, but in addition to that, the counselor helps the students with job placements, helps the students create resumes and cover letters. And again, answering a question that Melanie had, our counselor also sits in with the students and does mock interviews with them so that they know how to approach it when they get a full-time interview for a job. Now, we don't do that for every student. We just do that for the students that ask us for that support. And our counselor also helps the students do, many other things like find housing for them. If they're coming from remote or rural locations and they're moving to the city of Winnipeg, we try to find housing for them. We try to find adequate childcare if they're coming with children, with family. Anything that you can think might be an issue that students might face, we try to help break down that barrier. As I mentioned before, we do a lot of team building work with our students. The great thing about our space is that we have one space. This is our lounge. We have, in addition to this, we have a computer room. We have 3 small breakout rooms that students can use for group work. But in this lounge, we have students who are just starting engineering. They're still doing their upgrading, right through to students who are in 5th and 6th year and finishing their engineering program. So this allows a lot of informal mentorship. We have as you can see, we have a small kitchenette in here. We have a fridge, we have a coffee machine, we have a microwave, anything to make this a homey place. And it very much is. I would have to say that, Melanie talked about the importance of connections. And it is so important. Like we have noticed with the pandemic and students not being on campus that, students are drifting away from us. We don't know if they're in difficulty. We don't have that opportunity for informal chatting with them and that informal group building. So we're losing more students than we normally would have because they can't use this space. We don't see them every day. When this space was when this space was open, students were coming in every day. I could talk to them. I could see how they were doing. And it was really, like I said, it really helps. My office is literally on the hallway that goes to this, so I can watch students, go down to the student room, and if I need to talk to them, I can interrupt and talk to them. Many years ago, our students created their own student association. It's called the Engineering Access Student Association. This is an older picture of them as a group. They do lots of work with the new students coming in and with existing students. Crib tournaments. They run a fridge program where students can get a decent meal at a fair cost, and the students to take care of all of that. They do a lot of different things in those regards. We're still dealing in Manitoba with, intergenerational trauma and intergenerational poverty. So we have to realize that many of our students are not coming to us with the same privileges that other students would have. So with regards to that, we've developed a scholarship and bursary program. We've had all of these companies come online and donate money to us so that we can give that money back to the students. We sort of split it half and half between scholarships and bursaries. We used to do that, but now we have far more money available in bursaries, which is good because bursaries are based on need, and and many of our students have a tremendous amount of need to continue in school. You know, we work with our students with career counseling. Again, our counselor does that. She helps identify the careers they might be interested in, the ways to get to those careers, and then ties them up, gets them involved with employers so that they can, you know, follow their interests. Here are some of our stats that we have. This goes back this is the start of the pandemic in the fall of last year. When I gave this presentation last time, we had 89 students enrolled. So that we're down to 69 now, and that was as of September. I know we've already lost probably half a dozen since then, maybe up to 9 students. So I would say we lost about a third of our students, and probably 80% of that is attributable to remote learning and the difficulty students are facing with that. Here's the breakdown between the different groups of students. There's our graduates. I think we have 8 more graduates since I had this stat put up there. I think this year we'll have 8 more graduates. I can't count them yet. They haven't actually graduated, but we have 8 that will be set to graduate. And we're running a program that lowers the entrance barrier to get into engineering, but the exit barrier to get into engineering is exactly the same. Students have to have all the same requirements, all the same classes as any one of their peers in order to graduate. And I think I managed to shove that all in probably record time for me anyways.
Honestly, Randy, you're able to cram in so many updates in a short period of time. It's amazing. It's amazing. And I know also some folks had to drop off, but we still have some people on the call. If anybody has any questions for Randy about the program. I know I have a couple questions. Anybody? Here.
Yes.
Hey, how's it going, man? Always great to hear you speak. I think, you know, you're doing really great work. I did have a couple questions. How does the NGAP program affect students' graduation for maximum time limit of being in engineering? I know at UVic, the maximum time limit was 7.5 years. How does that work through NGAP if it adds another year or 2 on that programming?
Yeah, I believe we're allowed 8.5 years. I think once we've run into that problem where I had to write a letter to the engineering faculty council to ask for an extension, or to a department head to ask for an extension for one student to graduate. So it hasn't really been a problem. Students can usually do it in the 7 years, but occasionally we have students who take 8.5 years. But the program, like I said, I've been able to get appeal that rule and get a positive ruling on that appeal.
Okay. No, that's good to know. And the other side is, where does funding, and this might be a question for Melanie as well, is where do you get the funding from within the organization to run MGAP, or within the institution?
We have this huge amount of history with NGAP, and because of it, it's the funding is very, it's difficult to explain in one sentence. But what happened was the provincial government and the federal government originally funded this program in 1985 through the Northern Flood Agreement, when they were flooding all the First Nation communities. This was one of the bonuses the First Nation communities got, was the funding for this program to get more Indigenous engineers. Since then, the federal government no longer funds this program, and haven't since the mid-90s. And the provincial government has turned over the funding of this program to the university. So when they did that, for many years, the funding was targeted, that the university couldn't spend it on anything else but the access programs. It is no longer targeted, but I think it would be a real problem now if the government decided not to continue to fund these programs. So we still continue funding. It's rolled up in their base budget, in the university's base budget.
Cool. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Kier. Thanks, Randy. I see Mira, you have your hand up. Do you mind just introducing yourself and ask away?
Yeah, my name is Mira Singh, and I'm work as the associate dean in the engineering faculty at the University of Calgary. I used to be at the University of Manitoba, so I know Randy from the University of Manitoba.
Yeah.
So nice to see you, Randy. And we're just, 35 years after University of Manitoba, we're just preparing to launch our own similar program in September. So we've gotten all the approvals, and so we're always looking towards the University of Manitoba and Queens for little things that we can do to improve our launch. And one of the things that you mentioned that really stood out to me that I didn't know was about the program progression. So you mentioned briefly that in the first and second year, the academic reviews of the Indigenous students were up to NGAP. And so do you
Absolutely.
have doing the academic reviews? Are they the same regulations as the calendar, like regulations for the rest of the students, or?
Not at all. Not at all. And those students that are in NGAP and they're taking the upgrading courses, like those are the prep courses in chemistry, physics, math, most of those courses don't show up on their transcript. So the university is blind to whether they pass or fail those upgrading courses. So they'll never show up on their transcript. The university will never use them to determine any GPAs or anything like that. The only things that university can use is their university level courses. So all that being said, it's up to my staff and myself on whether a student progresses in engineering or doesn't progress in engineering. And we don't have a rule book, because for our students, a rule book would be useless. We determine a student's progression in NGAP based on what we know of that student and what reasons that student may have to be in that position they are. And then we will decide what happens to that student based on that.
Okay, but this is just based on the courses that you're offering and not the rest of the common courses that they might be taking with the other students.
It is based on what the other courses they'll be taking as well.
Okay.
But what will happen is if they failed, let's say they failed engineering design, okay? That might be the only course they take that term because they're taking 3 upgrading courses. I can't get rid of that F. It'll be on their transcript and it will count in their further GPA. But that student won't be assessed by the Department of Engineering, the Faculty of Engineering, until that student leaves the program, until that student joins a department. So that student might have a 0.00 GPA because he got 1 F, but yet I'm the one that, and not just me, my staff and I are the one that decides that progression of that student.
While they're in the program. That's wonderful. Thanks so much, Randy.
You're welcome, Mira. Nice seeing you again.
Nice seeing you too.
And Kyle in the comments said viewing students through an equity lens, and I think that's exactly what you're doing with NGAP. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Levi.
Hey, Randy. So about a year ago, we had a conversation regarding trying to start up an NGAP program at the University of Victoria. Since then, I've had a number of discussions, and generally my issue relates to what Kira brought up as funding. Unfortunately, we didn't have funding in the past, right? So it's very hard to ask for funding to start it up, and I always get stuck at that point. Would you have any recommendations to, say, start a program and?
That's a good question. I'll say this because UVic is probably is a smaller institution, but for a large institution, my budget for my year for my program is about $500,000, right?
Oh, okay.
This is it's not huge money, right? Some large universities, this is money that falls out of the president's pocket every year, kind of thing. You know what I mean? So it's not huge money. So the thing, I find that BC is ahead in a lot of things they do. I think playing to that might be the way to do it, right? You might not be able to get one funder on board to do it, but maybe if you got several funders and then you went to your institution or to the government and say, this is what we have, we just need a little bit more. Can we do a little bit more?
Oh, okay. Yeah,
sorry, but just to finish that off, that being said, my peers across the country refer to the NGAP as the Cadillac of access programs. And they always say that they don't have the funding to run the Cadillac of access programs. So they're running the Volkswagens of access programs or other similar models, right? So, if I would say, if you had any funding, start small, right? In some programs, maybe you just need one person and not have the expectation that you're going to be doing all kinds of bridging programs like we're running, right? So, maybe you just need one person to coordinate, to help students understand. And then you just look for high achieving Indigenous students coming into your program and just support those high achieving Indigenous students with scholarships, bursaries, tutoring, and whatever you need, through one person sort of being a coordinator. Maybe that's what you look at doing to start with, have some success and then build on that. Much like what Melanie has done. Now all of a sudden she's got staff where for many years it was Melanie. You know what I mean? And now she has staff. Well, that didn't happen overnight, but it did happen with one small step.
No, okay. Okay, yeah, thanks. That's the other thing I've run into, again, I think I probably know the answer to this question, but how important is that study space for the students? I think it's incredibly important. And that's something that the university has an issue with, is that any piece of square footage we have, they don't want to give up.
Yeah. I still write into that myself. And I always got to be very clever in how I steal more space. You know what I mean? You know what? I always feel it's very, very important. And I would go far beyond calling it study space, because it isn't study space. It is communal space, right? It is space that we are giving our student body, our NGAP student body, away from all the rest of the things that are going on in engineering. You know what I mean? And think of it as a space where students can avoid like constant microaggressions, where they can avoid having to go eat lunch with all the other engineering students and listen to all those things that they might have to listen to. They can have a separate space in NGAP where they can go and they can talk about those issues and they can deal with them and build positive social networks, which might be difficult to build in the Faculty of Engineering if there aren't enough of you in 1 year or one cohort to do that.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so summary is that space is very important, right?
The summary is that space is very important.
Okay,
one staff member that's working with Indigenous students to help them get through the bureaucracy and the space for them to call their own. I would say those would be two fundamental. If you had to do anything, those would be the two things I would work on.
Okay, yeah, that's kind of what I've been fighting for, and I've had very little luck with that. Any little closet is already designated, and I saw Kira mention something about a future faculty expansion, and that space is already maxed out, and every square foot is taken. So, okay. Anyways, thanks for the information, and probably have another talk at some point in the future. Hopefully, I can get some funding committed. So.
Sure. And I'm more than willing to talk, and I'm more than willing to outline the importance of the space, because without the space, you are just, again, a bunch of discarnate Indigenous people in your faculty. And you really don't have a program, I don't think, without the space.
Okay, that's a useful thing I can bring up in meetings. So.
Yep. Any further questions?
I also want to be aware of the time. I know folks have dropped off, but obviously the conversation is still going pretty hot. So Russ, one more question, and then we'll probably wrap it up at that point.
Yeah, it's just one comment as much as anything. I just want to acknowledge that Randy actually dropped out to our campus here for the College of the Rockies and gave a presentation on NGAP. And there is this immediate reaction of, well, gee, can we afford it or not? And unfortunately, that sort of slowed things down a bit. Now we've had a whole bunch of personnel changes. So, but I'll still work on it. And I got to say, BC may be ahead in some areas, but when it comes down to study space for students in all institutions, it's miserable. So it's an uphill battle anyway, Levi. But it doesn't mean to say you don't try. Thanks.
Yeah. Well, you're welcome, Russ. Nice to see you again. It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a while. It was great. see, I've got the viewscape in the background there. You saw it.
I see that. Yeah. Oh, isn't that from your back window?
It is.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. You know, the other thing I was going to say, I think we still have a few people on. The other thing I was going to say, which I often get asked for, but wasn't asked for today, is that the NGAP students do not follow the normal entry requirements of all the other NGAP students. They are admitted separately within NGAP. And some places, maybe this is a stickler. In the University of Manitoba, we have not had a problem with this. The staff and myself, we are the sole people who decide who gets into NGAP. And then we tell the university who we've accepted, and then they put them into the University of Manitoba. So that's important, because this idea of having to get 85 or 89 or 90% in math, physics, and chemistry, and to have that level and only be allowed in or start counting down from the top, that is a complete sign of privilege. That is a construct, an artificial construct, in order to keep people out who don't have privilege. And I can't say it better than that. So when we have those constructs, we are knowingly doing that so that we can keep people out who have part-time jobs in order to afford to go to university, right? That's what we're doing. So, you know, that's why we've removed that construct. All right. Does Russ have another question, or is that just, he's just giving me the high five?
It's a virtual high five.
Sorry, I haven't lowered my hand, but I'll give you a high five anyway.
Thanks, Russ.
Well, I know maybe there might be some more questions, but I do want to be aware of the time and the time that you've given Randy and the folks on the call. Recording this, the intention is to share it with others, because all these nuggets of wisdom that you and Melanie can share are incredibly inspiring. And as you can see, other access programs are popping up, or there is intention. And so you continue to inspire that across the country. And so the idea is to keep this going by sharing more and more of this information. Thank you so much for everything that you do, Randy. It's always fantastic. I feel like we could listen to you for hours, but you have other things to do too. So thank you so much. Thank you again. And thanks everyone on the call. We'll share the links. And Randy, if you have any links that you want to share with us, anything of the materials you've produced, I'll put together yours and Melanie's and send it all out to the network.
Great. Thanks for having me, Cassandra.
As always, thank you, Randy.
Take care. Have a good weekend, everybody.
Bye.